And it is my honor and pleasure and delight at this point in our service to welcome our scholar in residence, Rabbi Amy Levin, to teach us and to speak about the situation going on in Israel.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I want to thank you already for the very warm welcome that I've gotten from so many of you. It's been really a pleasure. And oh, okay, thank you. Thank you. So one of the pleasant things that has happened in the course of this year is that I got to meet your rabbi, who I had never met before. And we've already had, this is the third time we are face-to-face, which is fantastic. So I'm just happy to get to know you. I have to tell you have wonderful taste in rabbis. And good job. But I'm here to tell you about some of the reality of being an Israeli and of being a Masorti rabbi in Israel, and just kind of give you a little of a picture of what our reality is like. I'm going to back up a little bit and talk about what the reality was for us as Masorti conservative rabbis in Israel. I am going to say we're not going to talk about politics, okay? Because first of all, it's Shabbat. And second of all, it's really not the thing that needs to be addressed at this moment, right? And you all, I know, are reading and listening and are hearing sort of the political side, the news side of what's happening in Israel. So I want to share with you some of the things that might not be making it to whatever newspaper or podcasts or newscasts, whatever it is that you're listening to. Back in the 1980s, I was on the executive board of the Masorti movement. We were just trying to get Masorti off the ground in Israel. And it was clearly going to be a challenging thing to do because of the way religious life has been structured in Israel. And Ben-Gurion did a lot of really obviously fantastic things, but one of the things that he could have done better is structure how religious life works in Israel. He basically was so busy getting everything else up and running in this new state in 1948 that he just kept in place the British practice of having a ministry of religions. Because he had to put together a Knesset, and he had to put together an Israel Defense Force, and he had to put together a government, and he had to put, it was just like, so this was up and it was running, and it was just not as important to him as some of the other things on his plate. So Ministry of Religions stayed, which means there is no separation of government funding and government structure and religious life in Israel. If you are Christian, you go to the Christian desk. And if you're Druze, you go to the Druze desk. And if you're Jewish, you go to the Jewish desk. And you get whatever religious services you need from those government officials who are in charge of those things. To the point where, for many Israelis who are not practicing involved Jews, and many who are actually, the title rabbi gets them furious. So I'll tell you a little story. I was just finishing rabbinical school and the second woman ordained from the Schechter Institute in Jerusalem. So the whole idea of a Masorti female rabbi was hot off the press, very new. And there was a congregation in Beit HaKerem in Jerusalem, which is this beautiful neighborhood. And one day the president of the congregation turns to the Israel Rabbinical Assembly and says, "We're looking for a rabbi." And as you can imagine, a whole bunch of people applied, because who doesn't want to be a rabbi in Beit HaKerem, right? And 2 or 3 of us were invited for Shabbat, as happens. And then one day I get a phone call, and he says, "We decided that we want you to be our rabbi." And I'm like, wow, blown away. That's super exciting. And he says, so come to the first board meeting with a work plan, because we've never had a rabbi before. They had been functioning as a chavurah for 12 years, and they'd never had a rabbinic presence in this group. So come with a work plan just so we kind of understand what you do. And I said, fine. And I walk into the first board meeting, and he says, here's Rabbi Levin, and she's our new rabbi. And half the board gets up, and they start screaming at him. You lied to us. You told us you were looking for an administrator. Yes, the most dysfunctional entry of a rabbi to a congregation. Completely, right. And and for the entire 3 years I was with that congregation, at every board meeting, I heard, Aval Rav mashtik kolot, which means rabbis shut people up. Rabbis shut people up. That has been the Israeli experience of rabbis. Was you come in and you have to, you're doing a wedding, God forbid, a funeral, whatever it is, and the rabbi's not interested. This is how you do it, and you do this, and you stand here and you say this, and that's it, and don't waste my time on all your personal stuff, right? It was basically rabbis or government bureaucrats. So here, all of these people who had been running their really lovely chavurah for 12 years thought that this guy was coming in and bringing them one of those guys, right? I mean, I kept like, hello, it's me, right? They literally could not get past the title. For 3 years, they couldn't get past the title. And finally, when he was done being president and the next guy came in, the next guy was from the anti-rabbi camp, we had doubled the membership of the congregation. And the guy says to me, okay, well, now you're just going to be like the rakezet, the administrator. And I said, that's great, but I'm not a rakezet, I'm a rabbi, so bye. And so I left. I'm telling you the story because that is what a lot of Israelis are carrying around in their head as rabbi. So here we come in, Masorti rabbis, with, you know how Masorti rabbis work, conservative rabbis work. People listen, they make eye contact, they respond to what you tell them, right? They take you very personally. And one of our great aspirations is to help you weave Judaism into your life more and more deeply as time goes on. I don't know whether you told them that's the agenda or not, but if not, I'm sorry, I just gave the whole thing away, right? Yeah. But it's personal. It's about you. It's about your life. It's about how Judaism weaves into your life and all the infinite ways that that's possible. That's not what Israelis have experienced. So this is what we have been doing since the 80s, is very slowly, small congregation by small congregation, minyan by minyan, trying to give Israelis the opportunity to experience a kind of Judaism that they have no idea exists. One of the best ways that happens is, of course, at a simcha, right? When people invite their friends from work and their neighbors and the relatives who are not involved in a community, they come to the bar bat mitzvah or the ufruf or whatever it is. All of us have stories like the two stories I'm about to tell you. So I have a congregation in Israel, and I'm working with this couple on their oldest kid's bar mitzvah. Sweet kid, lovely family. And I say, and we're, as one does, we're sitting there going through the list, who's going to have the first aliyah, who's going to have the second aliyah, grandparents, whoever's coming. And we get to the last aliyah before the kid's going to have his aliyah. And I say to the parents, and you'll have an aliyah together. And the mom says, no, I'm really not going to take the aliyah. And I said, we're egalitarian, female rabbi, it's okay. And she said, yeah, that's true, but you don't understand. I grew up in a shmutznik kibbutz. Now, shmutznik means hashomer hatzair, which is, it's not just a secular Zionist movement, It is a anti-religious, secular Zionist movement. They aren't lukewarm about religion. They are, no, not under our roof, right? So she said, and my brothers are coming from the kibbutz, and I don't know what they're going to think, I mean, just the fact that their nephew's having an aliyah, and I can't push it any more than that. It's like, oh, my brothers are coming, and she's getting me nervous about the brothers, because the brothers are coming from the kibbutz, and so we have the simcha, and the kid's adorable, and he does a great job, and all of that. And then we get to the kiddush. And she didn't tell me that there are 3 of them, and they're all over 6 feet tall. So it's like this wall of kibbutznikim are walking towards me. And so you have to understand, Hashomer Hatzair, they are affectionately in Israel called shmutznikim. And you know what shmutz is, right? Okay, so these shmutznikim are walking towards me, and I'm like, is it time to say Shema? I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. These guys come up to me, and they say, Zot hayadut anachnu tzrichim po ba'aretz. This is the Judaism we need in Israel. Yeah, exactly, right? If we can get, I'll be nice now, Hashomer Hatzair guys, to see that Judaism has something to say to them about who they are and what our values are as a people and relationships between people in a community, that's huge. That's huge, right? And another one was, bat mitzvah this time, making the list, who's having an aliyah. Mom won't take an aliyah. She won't take an aliyah because her Orthodox grandmother is coming. And she's worried about her Orthodox, because my Savta's coming, and she's Orthodox, and she's going on and on about the Savta. And I'm like, oh no, the Savta. Simcha, the girl's adorable, it's a beautiful aliyah, it's a beautiful simcha. Kiddush, it's like, stop going to Kiddush. It never works out well. So I'm at Kiddush, and the Savta comes over to me. So I'm 5'3". The Savta comes up to here, right? She comes up to me, this woman, with a shmata on her head, and she says, I've sat behind the mechitza my entire life. This is the first time I ever felt like I was part of services. Oive, right? So our frustration level is unbelievable because we feel like we have this gift of an enlightened and compassionate and deeply rooted Judaism, deeply rooted in halakha, deeply rooted in midrash, and we're walking around with this gift, and we can't get it delivered. People don't know we're there. It's unbelievably frustrating. But every single one of my colleagues has stories like this because every one of my colleagues in a congregation has had these Kiddush experiences with the guests, right? So that's one piece of this. Another piece of this, of course, is what has happened since October 7th, right? I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of it because you've already read it and you've seen it and you're processing it however you're processing it. But what I do want to tell you about is the experience of, the suburban girl who grew up in West Orange, New Jersey, who is living in Israel and is going through this experience. That's me, West Orange, New Jersey. I was one of the kids who led the moratorium against the Vietnam War from my high school. We marched the entire high school out to the football field because we were pacifists and we were against the Vietnam War, and we brought the whole school out, right? So here I am, decades later, and this just overwhelmingly nightmarish attack happens. And not only does a horrifically nightmarish attack happens, but within hours, people are called up for reserve duty. I was you may remember that pretty soon after the war started, I don't remember how many Shabbatot, 2, 3 Shabbatot after the war started, something like that, there was like an international solidarity Shabbat. And I was asked to write something. So among the things that I wrote is, it doesn't, you remember Kevin Bacon's 6 degrees of separation? You don't need 6. In Israel, you need like 2. 1 to 2 degrees of separation, and you know somebody personally who has been wounded, who is a hostage, who is in uniform in Gaza. It's all very immediate because the whole country is as big as New Jersey, right? So everybody has a connection to somebody else through a community or through being a relative or whatever it may be. It is intense and it is immediate because you know somebody, at least one somebody, if not more than one somebody, who is deeply involved. We have a stellar colleague who is the rabbi of the congregation in Haifa. When he was in his senior year of rabbinical school, I was asked to mentor him in his student pulpit. And then after I mentored him in his student pulpit, then he was hired, after ordination, he was hired to be the rabbi of the congregation in Haifa. If you're ever in Israel, you should go to Haifa, to Kilat Moriah, because David Arias is wonderful. And they asked me to mentor him again, as a young colleague. October 7th, there was a Shabbat, right? It was in Israel, Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeres the same day, so it's long tefillah. He got his call up for reserve duty that day. And he came back, he had his first break about a month ago. He got back for Shabbatot here and there, but he got a break, and we're now waiting any day he's going to get called back again, right? And he has been in Gaza. When somebody is in Gaza, everybody in the unit hands their cell phones over to somebody or other outside of Gaza, and they hold all the cell phones, and then when you come back, you get your cell phone back and you can turn it on again. So we're all spoiled with, I can always send a WhatsApp, there's just no way to know what's going on until they get out and and they pick up their phones again. Everybody knows somebody who is in uniform in Gaza. And then not everybody has to be in Gaza. There's all other sorts of things that are going on. So I live on Hanaton. Hanaton is a combination of, part of it is a kibbutz, and part of it it's called a harchava. It's like a suburban little strip of area around the land of the kibbutz. It was established as a Masorti kibbutz in the 1980s. Now it's this kind of crazy experiment in multi-denominational Jewish life. We have 11 rabbis from 6 different ordinations, and nobody is the rabbi. Right. So when you need something rabbinic, you go to whichever one of the 11 of us you like or whatever. Nobody keeps score about who gets to do how many bar mitzvahs or how many, whatever anybody wants is fine with any of us. So it's an extraordinary community. One of the best things about it is my son and his family live across the street. My son's an artist, like literally. He has a studio on the kibbutz. And he has a program where they take people out to the woods and they do meditation and they do art, and it's very cool. And his whole life growing up, he was a complete Luftmensch. Like the mantra in the house was, Earth to REA, come in, please. Because he was always elsewhere and never knew where anything was, or, that's homework, I was supposed to bring it to school. It was just amazing. And I was terrified about him going into the army when he was 18 because he never paid attention to anything that was going on around him. And how could they put ammunition in this kid's hand? It was just... So he developed what he called his army head. Like he would put on his uniform and he would start paying attention, and then he'd come home and he'd take off his uniform and he was back to his parallel universe, whatever it was. And that's how he got through the army. And thank God, he saw some tough stuff. He had to do some tough things, but he was never wounded. He was like, okay, he's 40 now, so this is 20 years ago. And And he took off his uniform when his last day of reserve duty was over and went back to being this sweet, gentle, spiritual artist type. And now there's a war. So there are two kinds of reserve duty. One is you have to get up and you have to leave where you live and you go to a reserve unit and you get posted wherever you get posted. But there's also a local reserve duty where you're back in uniform and you are in an armed patrol protecting your yishuv, protecting your settlement. So that's what Aryeh is doing. And it was just so jarring seeing him back in uniform again. And he calls me up one day and he says, come over, which happens all the time. But this time he needed me to come to make sure that the year-old baby was out of the way while he was putting a lock on a cupboard door so he would have a safe place to keep his weapon, right? Which was just like, this wasn't supposed to happen, right? We were done with this. And we're in the Jezreel Valley, which is quiet and tranquil, and nobody's bothering us there, thank God, right? But armed patrol. So what I'm trying to give you a little bit of a sense of is how it feels to be part of the reality of this, which you probably don't hear on PBS or wherever, whatever it is that you're listening to, right? Another thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of related to that and to my, West Orange, New Jersey thing, which is the military are very close to us because everybody is military. And I remember when before we made Aliyah, Memorial Day and Veterans Day were days for sales, right? And picnics and things like that. It very rarely had anything to do with actual people who had done military service or died in military service, right? And when I had congregations in the States, I would actually get on this government website and I would make a list of the members of the United States Armed Forces who had died in service during the course of that year, and I would distribute that to the members of the congregation, because if it's Memorial Day, then you're supposed to be memorializing something other than the high price of something, right? You're supposed to memorialize these people who gave their lives. It's so remote for so many of us in the United States. Unless we're like living near an army base, right? Or a member of our immediate family is in uniform, it's just such a different kind of a conversation. And when we do have a conversation about the military, we're more inclined to talk about the budget and to talk about veteran services, and they should be able to have this and they should be able to have that, and whatever it is. But it's not a conversation about these are the people who are right next to us who we love and whose lives are on the line. In Israel, it's family, it's friends, it's everybody is in uniform of some type or other. And so the conversation is a very different kind of conversation. The conversation about military in Israel isn't about them, it's about us. Because if it's not me personally, it's my son and my friends' kids and my other friends' husbands and and all of that. So it's just such a different sort of presence in what we deal with and what the reality is. I could go on, but I probably shouldn't. So I just hope you have a sense of what this feels like in terms of our reality and what the things that we're engaged in and that we're talking about and that we're doing that don't make it to the press and don't make it to the media and all of that. And I understand we'll have an opportunity to keep the conversation going over dessert. So please, whatever I have said that piques interest or a question, feel free to bring it up later. I'll be really happy to hear what you want to talk about. Shabbat Shalom to everybody.